The key did not turn in the lock, and for one quiet second, I thought grief had finally made me forget how to enter my own home. I stood on the front porch of the white two-story house on Maple Ridge Drive, holding my purse in one hand and my useless brass key in the other, while the October wind pushed dry leaves across the driveway like it was trying to sweep me away with them. I had just come back from a cardiology appointment outside Cleveland, nothing serious, just the kind of checkup a 68-year-old widow learns not to postpone. My knees ached from sitting too long in the waiting room. My hands smelled faintly of hand sanitizer. All I wanted was to step inside, take off my shoes, make a cup of tea, and sit beneath the framed photograph of Robert and me from our 25th anniversary. But the lock was new. Shiny. Silver. Not the old brass one Robert had installed himself 20 years earlier after joking that no Whitaker woman should ever have to jiggle a key in her own door. I tried again. The key slid in halfway, then stopped. I pulled it out, looked at it, and tried the back door. Same thing. Then the garage keypad blinked red when I entered the code I had used for 12 years. That was when I saw the boxes. 3 cardboard boxes sat beside the porch swing, the flaps folded badly, as if someone had packed in a hurry but not with regret. My winter sweaters were in the first one. The second held my old recipe books, a chipped blue vase, and the silver picture frame Robert had given me the Christmas before he passed. The third box made my chest go still. Inside it, wrapped in a bath towel, was the small wooden urn that held Robert's ashes. For a moment, the whole street seemed to go silent. No lawnmower, no passing car, no barking dog from the Hendersons' yard next door. Just me, standing outside the house where I had lived for 36 years, looking at my husband in a cardboard box on the porch like he was clutter someone had finally decided to remove. The front curtain shifted. Then the door opened about 6 inches, held by the new chain lock. Brittany stood there in a cream sweater I had seen. Her wear to church, her blonde hair smooth, her expression gentle in the way people look gentle when they have already decided to be cruel. Behind her in the dim hallway, I could see my son Daniel. He did not step forward. He did not say my name. "We changed the locks, Margaret," Brittany said, as if she were informing me that the trash pickup day had moved to Friday. "This arrangement has gone on long enough. Daniel and I need to start making practical decisions." I looked past her at my son. He stared at the floor. "Daniel," I said softly, "did you know about this?" His mouth moved, but Brittany answered first. "This house belongs to Daniel now. You know Robert would have wanted his son to have stability." She smiled a little wider. "And honestly, it is time you stopped living in the past." I looked down at Robert's urn, at the towel twisted around it, at the corner of our wedding album sticking out from beneath a folded cardigan. Something inside me wanted to shake. Something else, colder and older, held me still. I did not beg. I did not raise my voice. I only bent down, lifted the urn carefully into my arms and said, "I see." Brittany blinked, like my calm disappointed her. Daniel finally looked up and I saw guilt there, but guilt without courage is only another kind of silence. I walked back down the porch steps, past the pumpkins Robert used to carve for the neighborhood children, past the mailbox that still said Whitaker, and stood beside my old Buick in the driveway. Before I opened the car door, I took out my phone and called Arthur Coleman, the lawyer Robert had trusted for almost 40 years. When he answered, I said, "Arthur, Brittany changed the locks." There was a pause on the line. Then he asked very quietly, "Are you safe, Margaret?" I looked at my house, at my son behind the glass, at my daughter-in-law smiling like she had one. "Yes," I said. "But I think it is time you showed them the deed." Arthur told me not to go back to the porch, not yet. He said it in that careful lawyer's voice people use when they are trying not to sound alarmed. "Drive somewhere public, Margaret. A coffee shop, the library, anywhere warm. I will make a few calls." So I drove 3 miles to a small diner near the grocery store, the one Robert and I used to visit after church when he wanted pancakes for lunch, and pretended it was my idea. I parked beneath a maple tree that had already dropped half its leaves and sat with both hands on the steering wheel. Robert's urn buckled into the passenger seat because I could not bear to set it on the floor. Through the windshield, the world continued like nothing had happened. A mother helped her little boy out of a minivan. An older man carried 2 paper cups of coffee to his wife. A teenager in a red hoodie laughed into his phone near the bus stop. Ordinary life moved right past me, and I felt strangely invisible inside it. 14 months earlier, after Robert's funeral, Brittany had started coming over more often. First, I told myself it was kindness. She brought casseroles and glass dishes and stood in my kitchen saying, "You should not have to manage all this alone, Margaret." She folded towels. She organized the pantry. She told Daniel I was too proud to ask for help. I wanted to believe her, because grief makes a person hungry for any voice that sounds like family. The first thing she changed was the living room curtains. Robert had liked the old green ones because they made the room soft in the afternoon light. Brittany called them depressing and ordered white linen panels online. "Fresh starts matter," she said, standing on a chair while Daniel held the curtain rod. I remember laughing weakly and saying they looked nice, even though the room suddenly felt like a hotel lobby. Then she moved Robert's recliner into the den because, as she put it, staring at an empty chair is not healthy. She took our anniversary photograph off the mantel and replaced it with a large framed picture of Daniel, Brittany, and their golden retriever at a lake rental in Michigan. "It brightens the space," she said. I did not argue. I was still learning how to wake up in a bed that felt too wide. Then came the small permissions she never asked for. She changed the Wi-Fi password because mine was too easy. She reset the alarm code because Daniel worried about security. She labeled shelves in my own laundry room. She threw away Robert's old work boots from the mudroom, saying they smelled like mildew, and when I found them missing, I sat on the basement stairs for 20 minutes with a basket of towels in my lap. She began inviting contractors to look at the kitchen. Not for repairs, for ideas. White cabinets. Quartz counters. A bigger island. "Someday this layout will not work for us," I heard her tell one of them. That word landed in my chest and stayed there. Daniel always softened it afterward. "Brittany just likes planning ahead, Mom." He said that about everything. When she moved my sewing table to the basement, she was planning ahead. When she told neighbors I was overwhelmed, she was planning ahead. When she suggested I stop driving at night because people your age do not notice things as fast, she was only concerned. Little by little, she learned that if she wrapped an insult in concern, Daniel would call it love. I sat in that diner parking lot with Robert's urn beside me, seeing the pattern clearly for the first time. She had not stolen the house that morning. She had been taking it 1 inch at a time, one curtain, one password, one family conversation at a time. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel appeared on the screen. "Mom, please do not make this harder. Brittany is trying to help everyone move forward." I read it twice, then placed the phone face down in my lap. The waitress inside flipped the diner sign from lunch specials to dinner specials. The sky turned the color of old pewter. I did not cry. I had cried enough in that house to last a lifetime. I only looked at Robert's urn and whispered, "You saw this coming, did you not?" Then Arthur called back and said, "Margaret, I found everything. Come to my office in the morning. Bring any tax bills you have. And do not speak to Brittany until I am with you." By morning, the anger had settled into something quieter, something more useful. I slept for less than 3 hours in a guest room at the Hampton Inn off Route 82, with Robert's urn on the nightstand and my purse wedged under the chair like I was a traveler in my own life. I woke before the alarm, washed my face with the tiny bar of hotel soap, and put on the navy cardigan Robert used to say made my eyes look sharper than my words. At 7:30, I drove to the house, but only to the curb. I did not pull into the driveway. I sat across the street with the engine running and watched Brittany step onto my porch in yoga pants and a long beige coat, carrying a mug from my kitchen. My kitchen. She looked comfortable. That was what hurt most. Not guilty, not nervous, not even rushed. Comfortable. She waved at Mrs. Henderson next door as if she had been the lady of that house for years, then bent to pick up the morning paper Robert had subscribed to until the day he died. I noticed my porch swing had been moved. The ceramic bird feeder was gone. 2 black trash bags sat near the garage. Small things. Quiet things. The kind of things no one could complain about without sounding fragile. But by then I understood that Brittany did not begin with doors. She began with perception. 2 months after the funeral, she started telling people I was not doing well. Not directly. Never that crude. At church coffee hour, she would touch my elbow and say, "Margaret has good days and difficult days." At the pharmacy, she told the clerk, "We are helping her keep track of medications now." At Daniel's office picnic, she laughed softly and said, "She forgets little things, but we love her through it." Each sentence sounded kind enough to pass inspection. Each one took something from me. By summer, neighbors began asking if I was still comfortable living alone. My dentist asked if Daniel was driving me to appointments. Even my cousin Elaine from Columbus called one afternoon and said, "Honey, Brittany mentioned you had left the stove on twice." I had not. Not once. But defending yourself against a lie repeated with concern is like trying to hold smoke in your hands. The more you wave it away, the more desperate you look. I made lists after that. Not because I was forgetful, but because I had been made to fear being called forgetful. I wrote down when I locked the doors, when I paid the electric bill, when I took my blood pressure pill, when I watered the begonias. My kitchen calendar became a witness. Brittany noticed, of course. She noticed everything that could be turned. "That is a lot of notes, Margaret," she said one Sunday, tapping the calendar with one pink fingernail. "Maybe we should talk to your doctor about anxiety." Daniel stood beside the refrigerator, drinking iced tea, saying nothing. That was when I first understood the shape of her plan. She was not only preparing the house for herself, she was preparing the world to believe I had lost the right to object. At Arthur's office, the waiting room smelled like lemon polish and old paper, the same as it had when Robert and I signed our wills there years before. Arthur Coleman came out himself, silver-haired, serious, wearing the brown tweed jacket Robert used to tease him about. He did not offer empty comfort. He simply took both my hands and said, "I am sorry she put him on the porch." That nearly broke me. Not the lock. Not the boxes. That one sentence. Because Arthur understood what Daniel had not. Robert was not an object to be moved out with sweaters and recipe books. He was my husband, my history, my witness. Inside his office, I placed the newest property tax bill on his desk. My name was printed clearly under owner of record. Arthur opened a thick blue folder and turned it toward me. "Robert came in here 6 months before he passed," he said. "He was worried Daniel might be pressured one day. He loved your son, Margaret, but he saw more than he said." I looked at the papers, at Robert's careful signature, at my own full name typed in black ink. Margaret Elaine Whitaker. Arthur tapped the deed with the end of his pen. "This house is yours. Not partially. Not eventually. Now." I sat very still. Outside the office window, traffic moved along Main Street, people heading to work, to school, to grocery stores, to normal mornings. Mine had just split open in the quietest way possible. Arthur leaned back and said, "There is more. Brittany called my office 3 weeks ago asking whether Daniel could authorize changes to the property." I looked up. "You did not tell me. Robert instructed me not to alarm you unless it became necessary." His voice lowered. "Yesterday made it necessary." I folded my hands in my lap so he would not see them tremble. For 14 months I had mistaken silence for weakness. Robert's silence. My own. But sitting there in that office, looking at the deed, I realized silence could also be preparation. Brittany had spent months building a story about a confused old widow. Robert had spent his final strength making sure the truth was written somewhere she could not edit it. Arthur did not let me leave with only the deed and a promise. He made copies of everything, placed the originals back into the blue folder, and slid a clean stack of documents across his desk as if he were handing me a shield. There was the warranty deed Robert had signed, the county recording stamp, the most recent property tax bill, the homeowner's insurance policy, and a letter Arthur had drafted before I arrived. The letter was polite, but every sentence carried weight. It stated that I was the sole legal owner of the property, that no one had permission to change locks, remove personal belongings, control access, or represent themselves as the decision-maker for the house. It gave Brittany and Daniel until 5 o'clock that evening to return every key, garage remote, alarm code, and item taken from the home. I read it once, then again, slower. My name looked strange on those pages, not because it did not belong there, but because I had spent so many months letting other people speak as if it did not. "Do you want me to call Daniel first?" Arthur asked. I looked at the window behind him, at the courthouse clock tower rising beyond Main Street. Robert and I had walked past that courthouse the day we bought our house. He had been 32, I had been 30, And we had eaten greasy hamburgers afterward in the front seat of our station wagon because we could not afford a real celebration. He kept patting the folder between us, saying, "One day this place will be paid off, Maggie. One day no one will be able to move us unless we choose to go." I had laughed at him then. We were young enough to think a mortgage was the biggest threat life could bring. I told Arthur, "No. I want them to come to the house." He studied my face for a moment. "Are you sure?" "Yes." My voice surprised me. It did not shake. "She took my husband's urn outside. She wanted the neighborhood to see me leave. Then the neighborhood can see me walk back in." Arthur nodded once, and there was something like respect in his eyes. He called Daniel first. I listened from the chair across the desk as my son answered with a tired, guarded voice. Arthur did not argue. He did not accuse. He simply said there were urgent property documents that required a meeting at the Maple Ridge Drive house that afternoon, and that both Daniel and Brittany needed to be present. Daniel asked if this was really necessary. Arthur said, "Very." Then Arthur called Brittany. Her voice came through faintly from the speaker, sweet and polished. "Is Margaret all right? She seemed very emotional yesterday." I looked down at my hands. Arthur glanced at me, then said, "Mrs. Whitaker is perfectly capable of participating in this meeting." There was a pause, brief but sharp. "Of course," Brittany said. "We only want what is best for her." That sentence had become her favorite wallpaper. She pasted it over every selfish thing she did until people stopped noticing the cracks beneath it. We spent the next hour preparing. Arthur told me what to say and, more importantly, what not to say. Do not debate feelings. Do not defend your memory. Do not explain your grief. We are dealing with facts. Facts. That word steadied me. Feelings could be twisted. Tears could be called instability. Anger could be called proof that I was difficult. But facts sat on paper in black ink. Facts had signatures, dates, county stamps, and legal descriptions measured in feet along a lot line. Facts did not care how charming Brittany sounded at church. Before we left, Arthur asked if there was anything else from the porch I needed recovered immediately. I thought of the wedding album, the recipe books, Robert's picture frame. Then I thought of the black trash bags by the garage. "She may have thrown things away," I said. The words tasted flat. Arthur's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "Then we will document that too." We drove separately to Maple Ridge Drive. I followed his Lincoln in my Buick, Robert's urn secured beside me again. The sky had cleared, and sunlight flashed off the lawns and mailboxes of the neighborhood I had known for decades. As we turned onto my street, I saw Mrs. Henderson pause with her rake in her hands. She watched Arthur park in the driveway, then watched me pull in behind him. Her expression changed when I stepped out holding the blue folder. People notice paper differently when a lawyer is standing beside it. Brittany opened the door before we knocked. She had changed clothes, of course. Dark slacks, pearl earrings, soft makeup, the costume of a reasonable woman. Daniel stood behind her with his arms folded, looking less like my son than a man waiting for weather he could not stop. Brittany smiled at Arthur first, then at me. "Margaret, I hope you had time to calm down." I looked at the new lock, then at her hand resting on my door. "I have had time," I said. "That is enough." Arthur stepped forward holding the letter. "We will discuss this inside." Brittany's smile flickered. "I am not sure that is appropriate." Arthur looked at her for one silent second. "It is her house." The words did not sound loud. They did not need to. Daniel's arms dropped to his sides. Brittany's fingers slipped from the doorframe. And for the first time since Robert died, I walked through my own front door without asking anyone for permission. The house looked familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. The way a face looks when someone has repeated a lie about it, so often that you begin searching for proof of the truth. The entry table had been moved closer to the staircase. Robert's framed fishing photo was gone from the wall, replaced by a round mirror with a gold rim. A new vanilla candle burned on the console, covering the scent of lemon oil and old wood that had always belonged to that foyer. Brittany stepped aside slowly, but not graciously. Her eyes moved from Arthur's briefcase to the blue folder in my hands, then back to my face. She was measuring the room, the mood, the danger. Daniel closed the door behind us, and the sound of the new lock clicking into place made something tighten in my chest. Arthur noticed. Leave it unlocked for now, he said. Daniel looked at Brittany first, as if permission still lived with her. That small glance told me more than any apology could have. He turned the deadbolt back with 2 fingers. We gathered in the kitchen because that was where all important Whittaker conversations had happened for 36 years. It was where Robert had taught Daniel to make scrambled eggs. It was where I had packed school lunches, rolled pie dough, paid bills, written sympathy cards, and waited through late nights when my son was a teenager and 5 minutes past curfew felt like an hour. Now Brittany had placed a stack of assisted living brochures on the counter beside my fruit bowl. Each one showed smiling gray-haired couples walking through gardens, playing cards, sitting in bright dining rooms under words like comfort, safety, and community. I picked one up and looked at it. The monthly price was printed in small gray type at the bottom. More than my first mortgage payment. Those are only options, Brittany said quickly. No one is forcing anything. Arthur opened his briefcase. Yesterday, the locks were changed and Mrs. Whittaker's belongings were placed outside. That is not an option. That is an action. Brittany folded her arms. We were trying to prevent confusion. Margaret has been under a lot of stress. There it was again. The soft rope. The gentle trap. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table Robert had sanded and refinished after Daniel spilled model airplane glue on it at age 9. I placed Robert's urn in front of me, not as a weapon but as a witness. Daniel looked at it then looked away. Mom, he said quietly. Brittany did not mean disrespect. I waited. The old Margaret would have helped him finish the apology he did not know how to make. She would have softened the room, soothed the embarrassment, protected his pride at the expense of her own. I did none of that. Arthur set the letter on the table and pushed a copy toward Brittany. Please read the first paragraph. Brittany gave a small laugh. Is this really necessary? I think we all know this is a family matter. Read it, Arthur said. His voice never rose, which made it harder to dismiss. She picked up the paper with 2 fingers, like it was something unpleasant from the bottom of a drawer. Her eyes moved across the lines. The color in her face changed only slightly, but I saw it. I had watched this woman perform concern for 14 months. I knew the moment performance slipped. Sole legal owner, she read under her breath. Daniel leaned closer. What does that mean? I looked at my son then. Not at the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, but at the man who had stood behind a locked door while his mother held his father's ashes on the porch. It means your father kept his promise, I said. Brittany put the paper down. That cannot be right. Robert always said Daniel would inherit the house. Arthur removed another document from the folder. Robert may have spoken generally about family stability, but legally, 6 months before his death, he transferred full ownership of this property to Margaret Elaine Whittaker. The deed was recorded with the county. The tax records reflect the same. The insurance policy reflects the same. He placed each document on the table one after another. Not dramatically. Precisely. County stamp. Signature. Parcel number. My full name. Brittany stared at the papers as if they were insults written in a language she almost understood. Daniel is his son, she said. Daniel is not the owner, Arthur replied. The refrigerator hummed. The candle flame bent slightly in the air from the heating vent. Outside, a rake scraped across Mrs. Henderson's yard. Ordinary sounds, surrounding an extraordinary silence. Daniel reached for the deed, and for the first time, he read instead of obeying. I watched his eyes stop on my name. His shoulders dropped. Brittany, he whispered. You told me Dad never changed anything. She turned on him with a smile that was too fast. I said I thought he had not. This is all very confusing. Arthur closed his pen cap. It is not confusing. Yesterday, someone who did not own this house hired a locksmith, denied access to the owner, and removed the owner's personal property. That needs to be corrected immediately. Brittany's polished expression hardened at the edges. Are you threatening me? No, Arthur said. I am informing you. I looked at the brochures, the new candle, the missing photograph, the white cabinet samples stacked near the sink. She had planned a future in my rooms while I was still breathing in them. I slid the assisted living brochure back across the table toward her. You chose a very nice place, I said calmly. Perhaps you should keep it. You may need somewhere to think about practical decisions. Daniel looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the first crack of understanding cross his face. Brittany had changed the locks because she thought grief had emptied me out. But grief had only cleared the room enough for me to hear the truth. Arthur slid one more page across the kitchen table, and this one finally made Brittany stop pretending the conversation was only uncomfortable. It was a written demand for immediate restoration of access and return of personal property. The words were formal, clean, and almost gentle, but they left no space for performance. Return all keys. Return all garage remotes. Provide the alarm code. Identify every item moved, discarded, stored, or retained. Confirm in writing that no further changes would be made to the property without my permission. Brittany read it with her lips pressed tight, then set it down as if the paper had offended her. This is ridiculous, she said. We were protecting her. Daniel, tell him. Daniel looked at the deed again. His face had gone pale in a way that made him look younger, not innocent, just younger. I did not know, he said. Brittany turned sharply. You knew we had to do something. Your mother was not coping. I folded my hands around the edge of Robert's urn. I was grieving. Exactly, Brittany said, seizing the word like it proved her point. You were overwhelmed. You still are. You are sitting here with that urn in the middle of the table like this is normal. The kitchen went quiet. Even Arthur looked up from his papers. I glanced down at the small wooden box, at the smooth lid I had polished with the sleeve of my cardigan that morning. Robert had sat at this table every Sunday with the newspaper spread beside his coffee. He had balanced checkbooks here. He had taught Daniel how to carve a Thanksgiving turkey here. He had held my hand here the night the doctor called with his diagnosis. If he could not sit beside me anymore, then his memory had every right to remain where he had built his life. I looked at Brittany and said, what is not normal is placing him on the porch. Daniel closed his eyes. Brittany's expression flickered, and for 1 second I thought shame might arrive. It did not. She reached into her purse and pulled out a key ring, 2 new silver keys, a garage remote, and a small slip of paper with the alarm code written in blue ink. She dropped them onto the table. Not hard, just enough to make a sound. There, she said. Satisfied. Arthur picked them up first, checked them against the letter, and placed them in front of me. Not yet, he said. The personal property. Brittany sighed. Everything is in the boxes outside. Not everything, I said. My voice was quiet, but I heard Daniel breathe in. Robert's fishing photograph is gone. His work boots are gone. The green curtains are gone. The ceramic bird feeder is gone. My wedding album was outside. My recipe books were outside. The silver frame was outside. There were black trash bags by the garage this morning. Brittany looked toward the back door. Old things were being sorted. The house was cluttered. My house, I said. 2 words. I had never said them that way before. Not as a reminder. As a boundary. Arthur removed a small notepad from his briefcase. We will need a list of everything discarded or relocated. Brittany gave a little laugh, but it had no warmth left in it. You cannot be serious. Curtains? Bird feeders? Old boots. Daniel turned to her. Brittany, did you throw Dad's boots away? She looked annoyed, as if the question itself were childish. They were in the mudroom for over a year. Daniel's face changed then. It was not dramatic. It was worse. It was the expression of a man realizing that the person he trusted had mistaken his father's memory for junk. He sat down slowly in the chair across from me, the chair Robert used to occupy when Daniel came over for Sunday dinner. Mom, he said, but... The word broke before he could attach an apology to it. I did not rescue him from that silence. Arthur kept writing. Mrs. Whitaker is also requesting that you remove any personal belongings you brought into the property without permission. Brittany stiffened. We live here part-time. You visit, I said. You were never invited to live here. Her cheeks colored. Daniel is your son. Yes, I said. And he knew where the spare room was. He also knew where the front door was. Neither gave him the right to hand you my house. Daniel put his elbows on the table and covered his face with both hands. I remembered those hands smaller, sticky with grape jelly, reaching for mine in a parking lot. I remembered thinking motherhood meant never letting go. No one tells you that sometimes love means letting your grown child feel the full weight of what he allowed. Brittany stood abruptly. I am not going to be humiliated in front of a lawyer in a house we have helped maintain. Arthur looked around the kitchen, at the cabinet samples, the brochures, the rearranged counters. Then I suggest you comply quickly. She stared at him, then at me. You are making a mistake, Margaret. I picked up the keys she had dropped and closed my fingers around them. They were cold from her purse. They would warm in my hand. No, I said. I made the mistake when I let concern sound like ownership. I will not make it twice. For a moment no one moved. Brittany stood beside the kitchen island with her purse clutched against her ribs, looking at the documents as if they had personally betrayed her. Daniel remained seated, his hands covering his face, the deed spread open in front of him like a report card he had failed to read until it was too late. Arthur waited with the patience of a man who had watched many families discover that blood did not protect them from greed. I looked around my kitchen and began counting what had changed. Not because the objects mattered more than people, but because objects remember what people try to erase. The blue ceramic canister Robert bought me at a flea market in Amish country was missing from the counter. The little brass bell I used to ring when dinner was ready for Daniel as a boy was no longer by the stove. My handwritten recipe cards had been moved from the drawer near the oven to a box marked Donate in the corner of the breakfast nook. Donate. Decades of Thanksgiving stuffing, lemon pound cake, Robert's favorite pot roast, Daniel's birthday pancakes, all waiting in a cardboard box under Brittany's neat black marker. I walked over and lifted the lid. My handwriting stared back at me, faded blue ink on yellowed cards. For years, Brittany had asked me for those recipes and never made a single one. Now she had decided they were clutter. I picked up the card for Robert's chicken noodle soup and held it between two fingers. There was a stain on the corner from the winter Daniel had pneumonia at age 7. I had made that soup for 5 straight days while Robert slept in a chair beside his bed. Daniel lowered his hands when he saw it. I remember that soup, he said quietly. Brittany gave an impatient breath. This is exactly what I mean. Every little thing becomes emotional. I turned to her slowly. No, Brittany. Every little thing became evidence. Arthur wrote that down. She noticed and went still. The word evidence changed the temperature in the room. Suddenly the recipe cards, the missing photos, the trash bags, the relocated furniture, the new locks, the brochures, the neighbors' comments, the phone calls, the careful little remarks about my memory, all of it stood up together. Not one dramatic act, but a pattern. Pattern is harder to excuse. Arthur asked Brittany where the black trash bags were. She said she did not know. Daniel stood and walked to the garage door. Brittany said his name sharply, but he opened it anyway. The garage smelled of cardboard, dust and lawn fertilizer. 2 black bags sat beside the recycling bin, exactly where I had seen them that morning. Daniel untied the first bag. Robert's work boots were inside, along with his old fishing hat, 3 framed photographs, and the wooden nameplate from his desk. Daniel picked up the boots like they were heavier than leather. They were scuffed at the toes, still carrying dried mud in the seams from the last spring he had planted. Tomatoes in the side garden. My son held them against his chest and closed his eyes. I did not comfort him. Comfort would have been too easy. Brittany stood in the doorway, arms folded. They were moldy, she said. Daniel opened his eyes. You told me Mom wanted to clear out Dad's things. I looked at him. I never said that. His face collapsed inward, not with tears, but with the quieter shame of realizing he had accepted someone else's version of his mother because it was more convenient than asking me. Arthur examined the contents without touching more than necessary. We will photograph these items, he said, and we will document any damage. Brittany's voice sharpened. This is absurd. You are treating me like I broke into a stranger's house. Arthur looked at her. You changed the locks on a property you do not own and placed the owner's belongings outside. The family relationship does not erase the conduct. That sentence landed harder than anger ever could. Brittany's eyes moved to Daniel, waiting for him to step back into his usual place beside her. He did not. He held Robert's boots in both hands and said, Why did you tell me Mom agreed? Brittany's expression softened instantly, the way it always did when she needed to regain control. Because she would have fought us over every box, Daniel. I was trying to spare you. He shook his head. No. You were trying to get me not to ask. The words were quiet, but they changed something in him. Not enough to erase what he had done. Enough to show he finally saw the outline of it. I carried the recipe cards back to the table and placed them beside Robert's urn. Then I took the assisted living brochures, stacked them neatly, and set them in front of Brittany. You built a story where I was confused, lonely, and in the way, I said. Then you started moving my life to make the story look true. Brittany opened her mouth, but no answer came out cleanly. She had explanations for single actions. She had no explanation for the whole picture. Arthur handed her another page. You will sign a temporary access and property restoration acknowledgement today. It confirms the keys have been returned. No further entry will occur without Mrs. Whitaker's permission, and all removed items will be accounted for. Brittany stared at the page. And if I refuse? Arthur closed the folder. Then the next conversation will not be at this kitchen table. Daniel looked at me then. Mom, I am sorry. I wanted those words to feel like a door opening. Instead, they felt like rain after the crops had already failed. Necessary, maybe. Too late to save what had been lost. I picked up Robert's wedding photograph from the trash bag and wiped dust from the glass with my sleeve. Sorry does not unlock a door, Daniel, I said. Keys do. Truth does. Changed behavior does. He nodded once, and for the first time in 14 months, he did not ask me to make anything easier for him. Brittany signed the acknowledgement with a hand so stiff the pen barely moved. Her signature, usually all loops and confidence on Christmas cards and church donation envelopes, came out narrow and uneven at the bottom of the page. Arthur watched without comment, then turned the paper toward Daniel. My son looked at me before he signed, and for a moment I saw the little boy who once asked permission before taking the last cookie from the jar. But he was not a little boy anymore. He was a grown man who had let his wife carry boxes to my porch and had stood behind glass while I held his father in my arms. He signed his name beneath hers. Arthur placed the document in his folder and said, Now we will address removal. Brittany looked up sharply. Removal? Your personal belongings, Arthur said. Anything brought into Mrs. Whitaker's property without her consent needs to leave today, unless she gives permission otherwise. Brittany gave me a look that was meant to remind me I was old, tired, and supposed to be generous. I had seen that look many times. At family dinners when she wanted the last word. At church when she wanted people to notice how patient she was with me. At Christmas when she handed me a sweater 2 sizes too large and said, I kept the receipt just in case. I stood and walked to the living room. The white curtains moved in the afternoon light. The gold mirror caught my reflection, pale but upright. The cabinet samples were leaning against the wall near the hallway. 2 decorative pillows I had never bought sat on my sofa. A box of Brittany's kitchen catalogs lay on Robert's old end table. She had not moved in with suitcases. She had moved in with assumptions. One pretty object at a time. Daniel followed me silently, carrying a roll of trash bags from under the sink. Do not use those, I said. He stopped. Those are mine. He set them down as if they might burn his hand. Brittany brought her own tote bags from her car. It took almost 2 hours. She packed her catalogs, her candles, her cabinet samples, her framed lake photograph, her throw blankets, her extra coffee mugs, the set of dishes she had ordered because mine were too formal for everyday life. With each item that left, my house seemed to breathe a little deeper. Mrs. Henderson crossed the street under the excuse of returning a casserole dish I had not used in 6 months. She stood at the edge of the porch, eyes moving from Arthur's car to Brittany's loaded trunk. Margaret, she said gently, is everything all right? Brittany froze in the doorway, tote bag in hand. This was the audience she had cultivated, the neighborhood where she had planted soft doubts about me for months. I could have exposed her right there. I could have said everything plainly and watched her polish crack under the Ohio afternoon sun. Instead, I took the casserole dish and smiled. Everything is being put back where it belongs. Mrs. Henderson looked at me, then at the boxes being carried out, and understood enough. Good, she said. You let me know if you need anything. That simple sentence warmed me more than all of Brittany's fake concern ever had. Back inside, Daniel had found Robert's photograph from the trash bag and set it on the mantel, but not in the right place. I moved it 2 inches to the left. There. That was where it belonged. I rehung the fishing photo in the hallway myself, though Daniel offered to do it. My hands were steadier than his. Arthur photographed the restored items, the damaged frame, the contents of the trash bags, the porch boxes, and the new lock. He made notes in careful handwriting. Brittany watched him with growing unease. "Are all these pictures necessary?" she asked. Arthur did not look up. "Yes." When her trunk was full, Brittany stood in the foyer with her coat over one arm. The cream sweater from yesterday was gone, replaced by a gray blouse that made her look smaller somehow. Not sorry. Smaller. "So what now?" she asked. I picked up the new keys from the entry table. "Now you leave." Daniel took a step toward me. "Mom, can I stay and talk?" I looked at him for a long moment. Once I would have said yes before he finished asking. I would have made coffee. I would have set out cookies. I would have let him cry if he needed to and apologize only halfway if that was all he could manage. But I had spent too much of my life rewarding partial courage. "Not today," I said. His face tightened. "Please. You watched me stand outside my own door yesterday," I said. "You can stand outside yours tonight and think about why." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. He nodded slowly, painfully, and walked out behind his wife. Brittany did not look back. Daniel did. I closed the door before his eyes could ask me to soften. Then I turned the lock from the inside, not because I was afraid, but because the sound belonged to me now. Arthur stayed a few minutes longer. He placed the deed copy on the kitchen table beside Robert's urn and said, "I recommend changing the locks again, properly this time with documentation. I also recommend updating your estate plan immediately." I looked around the kitchen at the recipe card stacked beside the fruit bowl, at Robert's photograph back on the mantel, at the brochure still sitting on the counter. I picked them up and dropped them into the recycling bin. "Tomorrow," I said. "Today I want my house quiet." After Arthur left, the silence felt different. Not hollow. Not frightened. Clean. I made tea in my own kettle, using my own mug, standing on my own kitchen floor. The sun was going down behind the maple trees, laying gold across the white curtains Brittany had chosen. I decided I would replace them with green ones again. Not because the old days could return, but because I could. The next morning I called a locksmith myself. His name was Carl, a quiet man from Medina with a gray beard and a tool belt that looked older than his truck. He arrived at 9:15, looked at the shiny lock Brittany had chosen and asked, "You want this one replaced?" I stood in the foyer with my coffee cooling in my hand and said, "All of them." He changed the front door, the back door, the garage entry, and the little side door Robert used when he came in from the garden with dirt on his shoes and tomatoes in his shirt pocket. This time, every receipt had my name on it. Every key went into my palm first. Carl handed me the final set and said, "You are all secured, Mrs. Whitaker." Secured. It was such a simple word, but it settled over me like a blanket. After he left, I drove to Arthur's office with Robert's urn beside me, and the green curtain samples I had picked up from a home store sitting in the back seat. Arthur had already prepared the estate documents. He did not rush me. He explained every page, every change, every consequence. Daniel would no longer have automatic access to the house, my accounts, or my medical decisions. Brittany would have no role anywhere, not by name, not by marriage, not by assumption. I signed slowly, carefully, writing Margaret Elaine Whitaker as if I were meeting myself again after a long absence. Arthur placed the papers in order and said, "Robert would be proud of you." I looked at the pen in my hand. Robert would be sad it became necessary. Arthur nodded. Both can be true. That afternoon Daniel called 7 times. I let each call go to voicemail. Not because I hated him. I did not. That would have been simpler. I loved him in the old places of my heart, the places that remembered fever nights, school plays, scraped knees, and the way he once held Robert's hand walking into a baseball game at Progressive Field. But love did not require me to open the door to someone who had watched me be pushed out of it. Near sunset, I listened to one voicemail. His voice sounded tired. "Mom, I should have asked questions. I should have stopped her. I do not know how to fix this." I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and looked at Robert's photograph on the mantel. "You start by not asking me to fix it for you," I said to the empty room. then deleted the message. A week later, Mrs. Henderson came over with banana bread and no questions she did not already know the answer to. She helped me hang the new green curtains, though she insisted the left panel was half an inch crooked until we both laughed for the first time in months. I put the recipe cards back in the drawer by the oven. I set Robert's boots in the mudroom, cleaned but not hidden. I rehung the wooden nameplate from his desk in the den. Some things went back exactly where they had been. Others did not. I moved my reading chair to the front window because I liked the morning light there. I bought a new porch swing cushion in deep blue. I planted mums along the walkway and replaced the ceramic bird feeder with a sturdier one that would survive Ohio winters. The house did not become a museum to Robert. It became mine, carrying him without burying me under him. Brittany never apologized. She sent one text through Daniel saying she had only tried to help during a difficult transition. I did not answer. Some lies are not worth correcting once the locks have been changed. Daniel began writing letters instead of calling. Real letters on paper where excuses had less room to hide. The first one was clumsy. The second was honest enough to hurt. By the third, he stopped mentioning Brittany and started mentioning himself. I read them all. I did not invite him over. Not yet. Forgiveness, I learned, is not the same as access. People confuse the two when they are used to taking both. On the first cold morning of November, I carried my coffee to the porch and sat beneath the maple tree, while the neighborhood woke up around me. School buses sighed at the corner. A dog barked 2 houses down. Somewhere, a rake scraped leaves across a driveway. My new keys rested on the small table beside me, catching the pale sunlight. They were ordinary keys, silver and plain, but when I looked at them, I did not see metal. I saw the deed in my name. I saw Robert's final act of protection. I saw every quiet moment I had mistaken for weakness turning into a wall I could stand behind. Brittany had believed grief made me easy to move. She did not understand that grief had made me still enough to notice every hand trying to push me. I took one slow sip of coffee and looked at the front door. Green curtains glowing behind the glass, my husband's photograph back on the wall, my name on every paper that mattered. For the first time since Robert died, the house was quiet without being empty. And when the morning wind passed over the porch, I did not feel swept away. I felt rooted.